Welcome back to As Told by You. Today we've got a very cool guest. I've been so excited when we were thinking about the fourth season. I was like, Brad is one guy I really want to get on this season because I think what they do over at the Fireflies is so cool. I want you to introduce yourself and tell us kind of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, my name is Brad Shank. I'm the team president for the Columbia Fireflies, and I've been with the team since before the stadium was even built. So I actually was down here in July of 2015 and have really seen this from, basically inception of is there going to be a minor league baseball team in Columbia to now where we are to this day. So it's been a fun ride, a wild one.
That's awesome. What brought you to minor league baseball? How'd you get into that?
Yeah, it was kind of one of these things that, I don't think anything ever happens by chance, but that's kind of what it felt like. I was in college. I was a business major. Always thought I was going to go into, finance or something along those lines. And so I had my internship set up with Edward Jones, and I was going to get started in doing that. And then my dad calls me on a random, evening and was like, hey, I just ran into Deanna, who is the GM of our hometown independent minor league baseball team, the Richmond Roosters, who are no longer a team. They had an intern that just backed out. I just figured I'd bring it up. You've always liked sports. I was one of those kids that anything with a ball, I was all about it. And so he said, maybe this is something that you'd be interested in. So went, interviewed, talked to him, and I was like, well, do I want to sit in an office making cold calls for a financial advisor, or do I want to work in a ballpark? And so I picked the ballpark. So that's kind of how it got started.
It's a good choice.
It's an easy choice, I think.
Yeah.
I think you might even make that choice.
I would definitely make that choice. That's how I got into computers to begin with.
Really?
I had a work study job in college, and my choice was library or computer lab.
Okay.
And I didn't know anything about the computer lab or computers in general, but I was like, that sounds better than library.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the jobs I applied for that summer, I put down that I knew all of these programs that I had seen in the computer lab. I didn't know anything about them. All I was doing was checking people in and out. I didn't do anything. But I put this down on my application and got hired. And then they put me at a desk and said, okay, here's your job. And I go, I have no idea what's going on. Yeah. And I had to learn it in like 5 days, but that's how I got it too. Yeah. So I remember you as the on-field guy, running the contest and doing all that kind of stuff. Tell me, was that still the same position you have now, or did you transition through?
So yeah, I've always been somebody who enjoys, I love live audiences. Mm-hmm. I feel like, some people, I know it's, I was actually just talking to somebody about this recently. Some people, I think, either they don't want to be in front of a camera or a crowd. Some people like the camera because it's a little less intrusive, but to me, I like the response. Like I like just off the cuff, being able to respond to what the crowd's doing. So when I first started in minor league baseball and that first internship, one of the things I did was I was the on-field MC, and I think it was just one of those things where I was the only one who grabbed the mic when they said, okay, who's going to do this? So I would go out and do it, had fun with it. We would do anything from dressing up like the village people and making the whole crowd do the YMCA and that kind of thing. Then once I got into minor league baseball as a career after, some twists and turns along the way, that was another thing that it just I was the one who was open to doing it and wanted to do it. So we got into that. I love entertaining the crowd. I think the reason I work in minor league baseball is not so much about the baseball. I love summertime outside. I love live events and baseball especially, just because it's such a social event, so different than other sports. And then with minor league baseball especially, it doesn't matter if you like baseball or not, we are going to entertain you. We've got 18 chances throughout the game that once play stops, we're going to do something fun. We're going to do something that's a little bit different, which, I always love talking to people who say, hey, I'm not even a baseball fan, but I love coming to your games because that's music to our ears.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. Yeah. And I love a hot dog wrapped in foil.
Yes.
Like you don't do that at home, So if you have a hot dog, you just take it off the grill and put it in the bun and eat it, right? But you don't wrap it in foil to get it that soft bun and all that stuff. Yep. That's how I prefer to have a hot dog.
Yeah.
So tell me what brought you to Columbia. So what's the travel here?
Yeah. So, I mean, I did that internship, and that internship was with a small club. 2 full-time employees, 8 interns. So the interns did everything. I'd literally cut the grass, do the field work, change kegs out in the concession stand during the day. Hey, come in and make sales calls. They'd rip out a section of the yellow pages. That's showing my age a little bit, but call these businesses. We try and sell them tickets or partnerships. We had a non-air conditioned merchandise and ticket office that you would have to work that. And then literally we would go get the field ready. The umpires would leave their locker room. We'd run in there, take a quick shower, and then national anthem, let's go. End of the night, you're doing the field work, you're cleaning the dugout. That is the one job out of everything I've ever done in baseball that I would tell you is the worst, cleaning a dugout after guys have been in there with, sunflower seeds and everything else. And then we take the laundry and then you do it again the next day. So after that year, I was like, I got paid $500 for the summer. Wow. So that I still remember $63.59 or something was a check I would get every, couple weeks. And so after that, I was like, I'm going to go back to my senior year. Let's reevaluate. And so I was like, this is not sustainable. So did some other things, which, I did sales of kind of home improvements and things like that, but it was literally going into people's homes. Did not love it. Didn't do that for very long, but I learned a lot. Like if you can go into somebody's home and sell them something, like that's pretty good. Yeah. Worked in the construction industry for a little bit, worked in retail. And I just didn't want to go to work every day. And so had an opportunity to get back into baseball in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and worked for the team there that was the Wizards. Started there in 2003. We were able to go through a rebrand and get a new ballpark there in 2009, and that's when the whole game kind of changed in my mind. That was when we shifted from a baseball team to basically an economic driver. Right. And that's more of what we do now than it is the baseball side. We're kind of a minor league baseball team covertly doing economic development. And so we opened the ballpark there in Fort Wayne. First year, we went from 260,000 in attendance to almost 400,000. And then from there on, it was 400,000 plus in attendance. That was from 2009 to 2015. In the midst of all that, our owner, was looking into other opportunities to do something similar because the results in Fort Wayne were astounding. It was $2 million in private development in downtown Fort Wayne the 10 years before the ballpark moved there. Since then, there's now been over $1.3 billion in private investment. So that was kind of the model. So we looked into this, with a bunch of different markets. And, one day our owner was in town in Fort Wayne and just said, hey, we may do this thing in Columbia, South Carolina. Would anybody be interested? And literally 2 weeks before that, I was talking with my wife and saying, hey, I feel like I need something new, a new challenge, something like that. And I said, but to do that, we may have to move and, we may have to go with a different owner. And she said, well, I don't want to go with a different owner. That's kind of a non-negotiable. Jason Fryer, who's our owner, is great, has been great to us. She said, but I might be open to moving. And I said, well, where would you be open to moving? She thought about it for a while, and she said, the only place I'd really be interested in going is South Carolina. I said, okay, what's the reason for that? Well, we vacationed in Hilton Head when I was a kid. She had some family who lived in Irmo. She said, I've always just liked it. I have good family memories there. Yeah. So then he comes in, hey, we might be doing this thing in Columbia, South Carolina. Anybody interested? Kind of rhetorically. And then I raise my hand. Everybody in the room, our leadership team looks around. They're like, why would you want to go there? And I'm like, well, here's, explain it. And so then it was, looking into it, we came and visited Columbia. We drove in we were at the beach, and I said, hey, let's just take a day, drive into Columbia and see where we go. So I remember come down Garner's Ferry, take a right on Hardin, take the left on Calhoun. Like I'm following this on Google Maps to see where, the Babcock was the one building that there was an address for. And we drove up towards the back of the Babcock. And at that point it's 2013, and so
it's still just like the asylum.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like it was the asylum. And so I look at my wife and she's like, where is a ballpark going? And I'm looking at the map and I kind of look and I'm like, I think it's right over there. And it looked like The Walking Dead. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like
Yeah.
an abandoned asylum. And so, she kind of slow motion looks back at me and is like, what are we getting ourselves into here? But now looking at it, anytime I'm right around that area of the site, I look at it and it's like, holy cow, like from where this was literally just over 10 years ago to where it is now is a huge difference. So it was a kind of one of these just winding roads that led here. Yeah.
So I remember in 2016 we worked with Hughes at Bull Street, kind of trying to tell the story a little bit about what this was and why we were doing it and all that kind of stuff. And we were there first night, first pitch. We were there at that game for Segra, not Segra, it was Spirit at the time.
Yep.
And just covered the game for Spirit and all that stuff. And there was an energy there that I really loved having.
Absolutely.
And so talk about that kind of transition from, because I know in the beginning it wasn't super well received by the city. Yeah. It seems to be much more well received now. How's that going?
Yeah, I mean, it was probably, and this card's on the table, I mean, it was probably a tougher transition than any of us even thought. Right. If you remember the vote on the ballpark, I mean, it passed by one vote. So that's not super uncommon because, there's always going to be, people who are a little, okay, is this the right way to get things going? But ultimately, there had to be something on that site that was able to survive on its own and draw lots and lots of people because that's the only way you're going to get these other development pieces. Right. And Hughes knew that. And there were other options. They came up and were in Fort Wayne. I remember Bob and then his son Robert, who's now, kind of running the show. And this is I'll tell this story. So Robert was there, and I think he was still pretty young at that point, like, just getting into it. And so we did all kinds of different promotions there. And he said, well, I want to be in a promotion. I'm not from here. Nobody will recognize me. I want to do one of these fun promotions. So we put him we had a Taco Bell sauce packet race where we had life-sized sauce packets from Taco Bell. I think he was fire or something. So you can't see their face or anything. So he was actually in our sauce packet race, won the sauce packet race. So if you ever talk to Robert, congratulate him on his Taco Bell sauce packet race win.
That's hilarious.
From Fort Wayne, Indiana. But, they came in, they saw it, and they were like, this is it. Yeah. And up there, the biggest thing that we were able to do that a lot of minor league teams weren't able to do is keep the ballpark going year round. Whether that was indoor events, outdoor events, and then looking at the weather here comparatively to Fort Wayne, Indiana, obviously that becomes, even more of an opportunity. So, it needed to happen. The first thing that we probably dealt with is we probably underestimated just the words Bull Street. I think have a connotation that has been a negative connotation for centuries. Over 100 years. One of the first things I remember when we came and we talked to people here is they would say, "Oh yeah, I remember my grandma used to say, hey, if you don't start acting bad, we're going to send you to Bull Street." That's right. So you've got all these generations of people who that is their kind of, when they hear Bull Street, it's stay away. It's I don't want to be there. We underestimated that like way too much. So I think that was one of the big challenges right off the bat. And then the other thing was the site had lots of challenges, because the development didn't kick off maybe as quick as we had hoped. That created problems with, 2018, there wasn't a road into the ballpark, right. So there were a lot of those types of things. But I also think it was just, we needed to really show this community, and this is something that we've done, I think, better recently than maybe we did initially, was we needed to show the community that there were many other things that we were going to benefit this community with besides just being a baseball team. Right. Getting out into the community, helping in situations where we could, getting out and getting involved in these different groups and nonprofits that are so active. I mean, Columbia as a community, the amount of nonprofits that are doing great things is, from a proportional standpoint, to me, a really high number. And so we've really kind of shifted that. And I think that's where things have kind of shifted for us as far as a perception of us. And then I also think anytime there's something new, it's just going to take time. It takes time for people to get used to it.
Yeah, and I think minor league baseball especially tends to go into these sort of mid-market to small market, towns, and I imagine that that's probably a similar thing.
It is.
You and I have
Yeah.
talked about Columbus, Georgia, and as we were working with Columbus this past year on doing marketing for their minor league team, it's been interesting to see kind of until the naming thing. We can talk about that if you want to, but once the naming thing came along, that sort of changed the tenor of it a little bit. But everybody was so into it, because I think a lot of what happens in small markets a lot of times is we are just so excited for something to do, right? And certainly the Fireflies gives you a great day. You can, especially when you have younger boys or younger kids, you can go. Just enjoy professional baseball,
Yep. And it's too, I mean, the other piece of it too is I think we underestimated how long minor league baseball had been gone from Columbia. Yeah. I mean, when the Bombers left, I mean, obviously there was still the Blowfish, but it wasn't the same, it just wasn't the same.
But also what
following.
It was like when the Bombers were in. And honestly, I went to those games as a kid. We had field trips to Bombers games. Yeah. And it was not a nice place to go to. No. I mean, it wasn't comfortable. There were a lot of things. This new stadium was like a real big city experience.
Absolutely.
And I thought that was a great element of it.
A lot of people, that was their first response. You can always tell. I love standing by the gates when we open up for games, and especially that first year. People walk in, and I mean, immediately their eyes are big. They're looking up. And you can tell who's here for the first time. And a lot of those folks, when I would talk to them, ask them, hey, is this your first time here? Yeah, the first thing out of their mouth was like, well, this is way different than the Bombers. And it's like, yeah, absolutely it is 100%. But everybody needs to see it for themselves to kind of get to that point. But to your point, like totally different experience than that. But I think in some people's mind, that was all they could correlate minor league baseball to.
Yeah. I mean, that was definitely it for a long time.
Well, I also think when the Fireflies came to Columbia, it was also at the same time, it was the beginning of this entertainment movement in baseball.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of minor league baseball thought of Bull Durham, right?
Yep.
Just gritty.
Kind of sad.
Just not an entertainment factor, right?
Yeah.
And of course, everyone thinks of the Savannah Bananas now,
right?
What they have transformed. They've created their own baseball.
Yeah.
And that's incredible.
Yeah.
But I was curious about the first year. So you guys were the Mets affiliated, and now the Royals affiliated. How does that work?
Yeah. So basically, to simplify it all down, when we were affiliated with the Mets, they would supply us with coaching staff, players. We split some of the expenses as far as, baseballs, bats, equipment, those kind of things. But basically, we are a place for them to have their guys play. We work with the team to make sure that they have everything they need from an amenities standpoint at the ballpark. But this shifted it's way different now than it was in 2016 even. When we were at the Mets, you'd have 2-year agreements with teams, and sometimes teams would switch affiliations and go back and forth. 2021, when basically minor league baseball was taken over or was taken in by Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball wanted more control over those things. They didn't want people in markets for 2 years. So now it's 10-year agreements. So when we signed with the Royals in 2021, that was a 10-year agreement. So that'll run through 2030.
That's
so
good,
it gets more continuity so that teams aren't switching affiliations as often. And then it was beneficial on both sides because they had requirements that they wanted out of ballparks because, like a Capital City Stadium would not be able to stick around today because the amenities for the players and the safety issues for the players wouldn't be up to par. So now there are standards that each team is having to figure out how to get up to. I mean, I'm sure you talk with the guys in Columbus about it. I mean, and there's some challenges to that. One thing I will tell you guys is like our ballpark here, we've been very, very blessed and fortunate that we haven't had to do as much as most teams. Even teams, our team in Fort Wayne, they had to put in way, way more work and money into the ballpark. We had built the ballpark in Columbia so that it was, right at those standards. We had to make some minor adjustments here and there, but those are more just changes in the game. Like now, every stadium has to have female locker room because umpires, coaches, different staff members, total shift. When we were in 2016, that was not something that was happening super often. Well, now it's almost a regular occurrence for someone on staff to be female. So there's been a shift in the game in that way, like with most sports. But there was a different tenor with the Mets than there is with the Royals. The Royals are more homegrown relationship. They want these guys to be out in the community here because this is another area for them to learn. That's where they train and learn how to interact with fans. The Royals players are just a different. There's a different feel for them when they interact with fans as well, which is great.
So do you get into any of the player personnel then? So you're just operating
exactly. Yeah,
on the outside.
We are more focused on the business side, which is why we focus on the entertainment, which is why we focus on, okay, what promotions are we going to run this night? Like, is it fireworks? Is it Thirsty Thursday? Is it, $2 hot dogs, whatever those things are, because we don't know from one day to the next what that product on the field is going to be. One thing that is amazing in not a good way, but since we moved here in 2016, we've never made the playoffs. So the product on the field hasn't always been great. I think based on the numbers within each league and that 2 teams make the playoffs each year from each division, if you had just drawn teams out of a hat, there's a 94% chance that we would have made the playoffs, yet we have not yet. Now, the Royals guys are telling me that is going to change quick sometime soon.
It would help if the team was better to get more people.
It would, yes. It would. I think everybody loves a winner, but it does put the focus for us on that business aspect, the entertainment, making sure that people have fun at the ballpark, because there may be we may have a starting pitcher who's a 17-year-old from the Dominican Republic that the most people he's ever thrown in front of is 100, and it's a Saturday night with fireworks and we got 8,000 people here. So
sure,
good luck, buddy. He may give up 9 in the first inning. It's happened. Like 100% that has happened. So what do we do in those cases to keep people coming back and entertained? Because it is. And that's something where this market's really different than Fort Wayne, because college athletics have always ruled here. Whether you're USC, or Clemson, it is about wins and losses, and that's all it's about. Now I think you've seen even a shift at that with USC because, the lights and all the different things that they're doing now, like they're realizing, okay, hey, if we can bring this experience to a different level, that also helps, and you still got to win or lose.
Well, and as a town, we're used to our team not making the playoffs. So it's okay, because that's what we're used to. We wouldn't know what to do with it.
So, but the other thing I wanted to ask about season 1, the Tebow effect. What was that like?
Was that?
So he was 2.
Oh, season 2.
He was year 2. That was like nothing else I've ever experienced, and the effect was.
What were some
huge.
of the things that happened with him being around and things you had to change?
Our attendance was probably almost double. For that, he was with us for 39 games, and for that 39 game stretch, we averaged over 6,000 people a game. Wow. Now that includes like weekdays, Mondays, wild stuff. The Sundays were the ones that probably went up the highest, because we did autographs on Sundays where our whole team would sign autographs, and thankfully he was gracious enough to do that. We just had to set a limit. But I remember that first Sunday, there was a line. We had him set up in front of our conference room. And he was the last guy in line for the players, because I was like, I don't want these other players feeling like they're not getting.
You have to skip everybody. You have to get that guy in order to get him.
Right. Yes. And some people were gracious, but others were like, no thanks. I'm going to Tim.
Tebow.
But there was a line literally all the way down the third base concourse, around the corner to our video board that first day. So we had to very quickly shift, because it was like, okay, this is going to be a bad experience. He's only signing for 45 minutes. I don't know if we're getting to there. So we literally had people watching and counting. So then the next Sunday, it was like the Disney thing. Hey, the character's only going to be here for this much. Cut the line off, hold a little sign, no autographs beyond this point.
Yeah.
Well, then I would be standing there doing that. And, I look like probably a 19, 20-year-old kid. I just drove down from Wisconsin. I've got finals tomorrow. I drove 13 hours overnight to get here to get Tim's autograph. And it's like, how do you, so it's like, get behind me. Like, we'll figure it out. But but he's also the only minor league player we've ever had that had a personal assistant.
Yeah.
Because he was at a totally different place in his life. So that was interesting. He had to have a little bit of protection for himself. And so nothing was direct from us to Tim. It was all through his personal assistant, so that I think he had to have that buffer. And he was always really gracious. But then there were some things that it just didn't necessarily make sense. Like we had a faith and family night. So, usually we would have a player, speak after the game. Low-hanging fruit. Like, obviously this guy can do that. Mm-hmm. Couldn't ask him directly. So we go to the personal assistant who asks the agent. We wait 2 weeks. Yeah, no, he's not going to do that. And I'm like, man, knowing him and having interacted with him, like, I don't think that's what he would have said.
Right.
So then we get a younger guy on our team to do it. He was not comfortable doing this. So he goes out, and it was tough. Like, he wasn't great at public speaking, and it just was tough. So then I'm going out to grab the mic from him, like, oh man, this was not great. Get ready to introduce the fireworks or count it down. And one of my sales guys runs out, pokes me, and he's like, hey, Tim wants to say something. So I'm like, all right, shift gears. So I'm like, hey, we've got one more, testimony for you. We get him out. I mean, he was, like, that's easy for him. So, he 90 seconds, a couple minutes, fantastic. Everybody stands up and cheers, and he walks off. And so I asked him afterwards, I was like, hey, what happened there? And he's like, well, I didn't know you guys needed anybody. And I said, well,
wow.
I said, we asked. And he's like, oh, okay, well, good to know. I said, well, why'd you come out? And he was sitting in the locker room and was watching it on TV was like, I just had to come out. Yeah. So genuinely was awesome with every fan.
Yeah.
But there was a huge effect. I mean, that year was our highest attendance ever. We were over 315,000. And it was probably even bigger on the road. I mean, all the other teams in our league were like, we can't wait to play Columbia because every game was a sellout.
Yeah. A lot of people related it to when Jordan was with the Barons.
Very similar.
Yeah.
Very similar. Yeah.
I love that story, the Jordan with the minor league baseball story. I remember Tebow's first game. We were covering it for Spirit. I don't remember what we were shooting, but I would know we refreshed that every year.
Yeah.
And I was
Roddy Broadnax, I'm sure, was
right. Roddy, yep. Right beside the dugout.
Yeah.
And I just happened to be there when Tebow walked out. I don't know. You just look up sometimes and you're there, and the camera's pointed at him, and everybody's like, "There's no way he's going to hit this."
Yeah.
Like, he can't be good at baseball. It just can't. It can't be possible.
Yeah.
And he hits a homer on his first at bat, and I was just rolling while it happened, and I was like, my goodness. Like, there's a few times where you get to be in exactly the right place at the right time. And I think I used that shot for 4 years in demos, like, there's Tebow hitting that homer,
I was right by the tunnel there.
Yeah.
And I don't pull out my phone. I don't normally do that, but just this seemed like one of those that, like, I should probably do that. Yeah. So I pulled it out, I think, right after he hit it. So I didn't get him hitting it, but I got him rounding the bases and coming into the dugout, and it was, people were going wild.
Well, and I think it's interesting, things like that, right, can happen in minor league baseball where, with major leagues, everything is so difficult to get in there. It's so expensive. It's all of that. And you kind of expect those things to happen, where with minor league, when those kind of things happen, it's a big moment,
Yeah.
And I think that's very cool.
And that year too, we had the other one that was the eclipse.
Yes.
Which was, I mean, that was probably one of the more surreal experiences I've ever had working in baseball.
Yeah.
And there was so much that went on behind the scenes that nobody else even knew about, because Abby Nas, who she was working on that. I remember she came back from I think a city meeting when they had first brought up that was happening, and she's like, "Hey, this is happening. can we do something with this? And I was like, well, let's play a game and stop it and
And
watch the
it
eclipse.
just so happened
Yeah.
happened like right at the perfect
Yeah.
viewing angle.
Yep.
So I had actually been called on that year was crazy for us too because there was so much national press here. And,
Yeah.
I got called by a guy from Discovery Networks who was
Yeah.
going to be shooting a documentary series about the eclipse.
Yep.
And he wanted to interview a NASA scientist that happened to be from Columbia. I didn't know this guy. I'd never. So it turns out that he has a disdain for NASA scientists. And when he started interviewing this guy, we had him in the dugout at the stadium. And when he started interviewing him, he gave him such a hard time for not really doing anything. Wow. Like he's like, scientists don't really do anything. But like scientists kind of come up with all the nerd stuff, but the engineers are really who does stuff.
Yeah.
And he just like berated him the whole time. I'm just sitting here behind the camera going, well, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want this guy to feel bad about being a scientist. That's pretty cool stuff, you know? And, but anyway, he and I kind of went all around town doing stuff about the eclipse. But he was drawn to the stadium because of the stadium being in that exact right viewing spot, which was pretty cool.
Well, and classic baseball. So we had the whole plan. Hey, because he was the one who came on the field, and I think just talked about what's happening, what to expect, that kind of thing. Which we're like, okay, we got this great plan. It's going to be perfect, and then baseball happens. So middle of the inning, we're counting down to like 5 minutes, and we wanted to get to a half inning so that it was, we had tried to get with both teams and say, hey, we're going to try and do this in the in between innings, because it was a long enough break that they were each going to have to bring in a new pitcher and do all that. So looked like it's going to work out perfectly. We're all good, and then umpire makes a call on a ball or strike that our manager doesn't like. So I'm standing right beside there. Manager goes out. I'm like, okay, we can't slow down a solar eclipse.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I'm like, is this going to be a quick one? So it goes on for 2 or 3 minutes, them going back and forth. And I'm like, man, just say the magic word so he can get tossed and get him out of here. So finally he gets tossed. We're down to like 3 minutes to go. And so he hits the top step, and the umpire yells one more thing back at him, goes back out, like gets another, So anyway, so we're down to the last minute. Abby and I are looking at each other panicking. We're like, we're going to just have to stop this in the middle. So we're like, well, let's give it one more batter. Next guy pops out. So it all ends up working out. But the ironic thing is our manager had gotten tossed. So he had gone into the locker room. Well, but it's a solar eclipse.
Yeah,
so
like you wanted to see the
he comes
solar
back
eclipse.
out, and he's laying on the grass right next to the umpire that just tossed him with all the players watching the solar eclipse. But I mean, that was just a wild day. Like the amount of people, like 9,600 people in the ballpark, and just
the light goes out on the
yeah.
on the
But
manager
it was
getting
like you could feel the temperature change and everything. It's
amazing it being in the middle of August, because it dropped from like 100 down to like 70.
Yeah.
and it was cool out.
Yeah.
Like you were like, holy moly. So what's the future look like for the Fireflies?
Yeah.
Do you see Bull Street becoming the thing that they intended it to become?
Yeah, I mean, since the ballpark opened, either constructed, under construction, or under contract projects, is now in excess of $1 billion. They just announced the university, in addition to the new health science campus, they're going to do that neurological hospital. And there's more things that are like very, very close to being announced here soon. So yes, I do think that we're just getting started. The size and scope of this project, I probably didn't even fully understand until being in it. But I mean, 181 acres, The way I correlate it to everybody is for most people here, they've been to Atlanta and they've been to a Braves game. You go to the Battery, which is awesome district, phenomenal pregame, postgame. They've got shopping, they've got all kinds of things. They've got people living there, and that is 63 acres.
Wow.
So you've got a development now that's a planned development in downtown Columbia that is 3 times the size of the Battery in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And like that's what gets people to start thinking, oh, okay, like once this all comes to fruition, there's going to be 4,000, 5,000 people living on site,
Sure.
let alone the amount of people that are coming to work and come to games. So we do really feel like we're just at these kind of beginning stages as far as what our overall attendance is going to end up being. That is a trajectory that I think will start to get steeper. The Bennett is now completed. The Babcock is really fully occupied.
Yeah.
Midtown at Bull Street is going to be, coming online this year. So by the end of this year, you're probably going to have over 1,000 people living on site within a block or two of the ballpark. So that's a real turning point. And then, Tupelo Honey, the Shuck and Shack, this gather kind of food hall idea that's coming around. So between that, the restaurants and all these other things, this is really what we, had hoped would happen within a couple of years of the ballpark opening. Fortunately, it just took a little longer, but we also hit, a time when retail and other things were just
in decline,
not happening. And so it's been big.
Yeah, well, Publico seems to be doing fine. I mean, they seem to be
very well.
This is what I think 3 years they've been in
Yeah.
there, right?
Yep.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
I think they're showing that it's a sustainable area,
Yes. Yeah.
year round, and that's really the challenge. Is like,
Right.
What is your season? April to October, right?
April to September.
September.
Yeah.
So outside of that, they seem to be able to
Yeah.
to be sustainable.
Well, the holiday lights are helping with that a bunch.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we started those in 2022. First year we had around 18,000 people. Last year we had over 30,000, and then this year we had over 40,000. So
Wow, that's great.
So that's continuing to grow, but they need those types of things, especially these retail spaces. Until there's more there that's going to be enough of a draw on its own, they need us to bring in hundreds, thousands of people, and that one's crazy because it's, basically 44 straight nights. But
Well, then Publico does their
the pop-up.
for
Yep.
Christmas, and
Yep.
and I'll tell you that last year we went to the lights, and then we went to the Charlotte Knights Stadium
Yeah.
that has the
Yeah.
lights up there, and my kid said she liked Columbia better.
Wow. All right.
She
I like
said
that.
it was a better thing.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Charlotte was so focused on the ice skating and the sledding that
Yep.
that the lights kind of got a less of a play,
Yeah.
So
I think yeah, and it's two different things. I've been to theirs as well, and I mean it is phenomenal. But yes, it is absolutely more focused on those two things as opposed to the lights.
The lights is a great thing to tag to the brand.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, Fireflies, lights.
Yeah.
It's just ideal.
Yeah.
well, and then I guess
But what else do you do
Yeah.
during the other 5 months of the year
Yeah.
where there's nothing going on?
So we actually, and this is a testament to our team, Alyssa, who does our special events, and Olivia, who we now have 2 full-time people that all they do is special events. So anything that is not a Fireflies baseball game or these holiday lights, they're planning events. So we last year had 240 events outside of baseball games.
Awesome.
And those are what continually are happening. The season takes a lot of time to plan out. So like promotional schedules, obviously we got a ticket sales staff and sponsorship staff that's always selling and getting ready for that next season. So it's just kind of, that's how the calendar turns. But these events are what continually bring people in. Now, some of them are, Walk for Life, which is bringing in, 4,000 or 5,000 people on a Saturday morning. Others are, a business meeting in our conference room for 20 people that's going to be there that day. So there's a big mix of those. We've got the lounge space, which is, almost 7,000 square feet that we can use to entertain. We do breakfast, luncheons, a lot of the Columbia Chamber breakfasts are up there, which that's been another, great benefit by having those there. It also opens us up to a lot more people that are coming to those chamber meetings and seeing the space and seeing it utilized there too.
Well, I'm a board member for AAF. We're doing the
yeah.
American Advertising Awards in
Yeah.
February there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
It really is.
a
I mean,
good space for that.
It can't just be a ballpark anymore. And you can't have, you're just not going to see stadiums like Capital City Stadium. I mean, that's just not going to be.
Where it's just a ballpark.
Yes.
Yeah. It's all you can do is come there and see a game and go home.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's got to be. And I do think over time, the plan will be that we're going to continue to add more amenities to the ballpark. We've got some ideas, things that were originally in the plans that just got value engineered out. We had a center field club that was a part of the original plans, which was, a space for, 150 to 200 people that is all glass on the front and sits right on top of the center field wall that has that view in of the ballpark, and has a rooftop on it. So there's things like that. We've got to figure out a way, and we haven't figured it out yet, but to get some sort of a water feature in the ballpark too. I think that
summer
would be great for
splash pad
summer.
in the back.
I mean, or who knows, maybe April. Like you just never know. Sometimes we've been, 85 degrees in April and you need that. So we're trying to find different ways to do that. And that's going to be, it's all got to go together, right? I mean, that attendance has to continue to increase and, continue to go up so that we can have the ability to continue to add those amenities. But we're always thinking about ways that we can do that. And I think once the development around us continues to grow, that will help that attendance grow, which will also then give us the opportunity to add and new experiences, new amenities.
What kind of plans do you have for getting the players more out in the community?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned that earlier, but
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever actually seen any of the players out in the community.
Yeah.
I see the Firefly everywhere. I see the mascot.
Mason does a good
And
job
Mason,
of getting
yeah.
out to the little leagues and
Yeah.
We, it's something we talked about with the Royals actually this offseason because I think 2021 was so tough because that was coming right off of COVID. They were very protective of not wanting, put the players in situations like that. So now we've had a couple of years after that where we've kind of stair-stepped it up, but probably not as quickly as I would have liked. This year, what I've talked with the Royals about is, kind of getting a schedule together where, it's every guy on the team and they're going to be doing something weekly. And obviously they can't do things when they're out of town, when they're on the road. But those weeks when they're home, figuring out a schedule where we're getting them out and getting them interacting. I mean, and that's something that they've said, hey, yes, we want to figure this out. Now, they also are protective of that player development side. They want to make sure now they monitor their sleep, they monitor, how much they're eating. If a guy hasn't, gotten enough rest, they don't want him going out. But I think that there's enough time when they're in town that yes, I think we've got to get more involved, getting them out to, little leagues, youth sports. One of the things that drew us to Columbia was the youth participation rates in sports are extremely high here, relative to around the country. So that's a great opportunity there, but also getting them out to schools, before the school year gets out, because we have a great reading program that, if kids read a certain amount of books, they can get a free ticket to a game, hot dog and a soft drink. And so even just doing that, but now even getting some of the Latin players out so that they can go to some of these schools that may have more Spanish speaking students and getting them to interact with them. So there's a lot of things that we've talked about, but I think some of it is just being intentional with their schedule and figuring out the right balance with the players, being able to still do what they need to do, because obviously the ultimate goal for them is, hey, I want to make it to the big leagues. So they've got to still have that focus, but there's enough time that I think we can do more there.
They got to learn that community, the media training, but also how to drive that. What it reminds me of a lot is the NIL situation with college athletes. What is the arrangement for Kansas City? So as these guys are going out, is this are they getting? Do they have to pay them to go out into the community? Right. Is this part of their job? What is that? What is that arrangement like?
So just really within the past 2 years, there is now a union for minor league players, which is something new. That there was always a Major League Baseball players union, but there was never a minor league players union. Now there is, which that's helped. That has helped a ton. Previously it was really tough on guys because you're coming in, and if you're not a bonus baby, well, you got to find some place to do a 6-month rent. To rent an apartment on your own, that was all on them. Now those are things that are covered by the Royals, and they set it up so that's made life a lot easier on the players. But they also set up in their agreement with the players that any appearances that are to promote the game and promote people coming to the ballpark, those are not ones that they need to be compensated for. Now, if I go out and I say, hey, XYZ company, would like for you to come out and promote their new truck. Yeah. Then we get the player in touch with them and they work out an NIL deal. Yeah. Yes. So, but community wise, if it's something that is promoting the Fireflies brand.
You're wearing your
promoting them.
Fireflies jersey in order
Yes.
to read
Yes.
kids the books to
Yes.
kids.
That's part of your job.
That's part of
right?
your
Yeah, and
that's
again,
cool.
promoting community, promoting the game, because they, Major League Baseball's made a big shift in how they have gone about things, because ultimately Major League Baseball's numbers were not going
Right.
up. This past year, they went up significantly, especially in younger demographics. They had really struggled with 18 to 35 for a while. Those numbers improved significantly this past year, and a lot of it's because they've shifted to. They want to now tell these guys stories of where they're from, who they are, like what's their motivation. They want us to help the guys share their stories, but I think the other way to do that is obviously face to face, like getting out into the community, whether it's with adults or kids.
Yeah.
And then that way they're kind of learning how to build their brand at this level, because if you don't learn it now and you get up to that level, you're going to be in trouble. That's where people take advantage of you.
Because they're going to have to do it by the time they get to the majors.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the division in Columbia?
So we are single A.
Single A.
Yeah,
And so
so
what
we're
does
that-
single A mean exactly?
We're the first step, basically.
Okay.
We are, once guys are drafted, they do have developmental teams at the spring training sites, but when they reformatted minor league baseball, they basically got rid of rookie ball is kind of what they do. They still have a developmental league, not necessarily affiliated with teams, but once guys have gone through like, hey, getting onboarded at spring training, we're kind of that first step. So normally our guys are anywhere from 17 to, sometimes we'll get a guy that's 22 or, 23 that just graduated from college. But if you're 24 or 25 here, you probably need to be moving up or you're going to get shipped
So
out.
Tebow was a real outlier. I mean,
Big time.
On a lot
Absolutely.
of levels.
But he had to, because
Yeah.
he had not played baseball since high school, I think, and he was 27, I think, when he was here. So and that's what's really astounding about the whole thing is like you take 9 years off of playing a sport,
Yeah.
kind of decide you want to get back into it, and then you're going into a professional
Right.
league. That was, I know he wasn't maybe the best baseball player out there, but man, it was pretty impressive for a guy to just come off of the rack and be able to do what he did.
But he's just an athlete, right?
Yeah.
It's just one of those things where he just is able to. Brian and I talk about this a lot. And honestly, before being partners with Brian, I had not had very many close relationships with athletes. I don't, you know what I mean? Like I don't get into the head of athletes very often, but we talk about how generally people aren't just single sport people, even though, you might excel at football to the Heisman level, but you also, still want to play baseball because you have that in you.
Yeah. And Tebow, it was all work ethic. I mean, he was a pro, like with what he ate, how he took care of his body. Like, he was keto before keto was cool. And, but we also, our manager at the time, LaHare, had to talk to him a lot about like, you got to slow down. Like football season's, 14, 15 games at that point in the NFL. We play 140 at that point. And I mean, his hands were raw. Like, because he wasn't satisfied with the result on the field. So he'd be in the cages pregame, postgame, extra work. Like, and I think that's what was successful for him with football, is he just outworked everybody.
Sure.
I think that helped him in baseball, but I also think it was such a different game. Like, you can't do that every single day for 140 days straight. You've got to find that balance. So that was interesting. I mean, the biggest shift right now is technology and these metrics and everything. Like, it's all
velocity,
analytics. And I mean, when our guys are taking BP, they literally have all of those stats on the video board. So they can see like, launch angle, exit velocity, all of these different things. I mean, when I'm standing next to the dugout getting ready to go out for a promotion or something, they've got an iPad up that's got spin rate, it's got, and each guy's getting, okay, here's what he throws, here's the velocity, here's the angle, here's, all the different stuff. And that has been a total change. Like, if you go to our ballpark now, comparatively to 2016, you're going to see these big white Hawkeye cameras everywhere, which they literally can track anything and everything that happens on that field. That has been a big shift to me. And it's funny because you talk to some of these older scouts and they're like, You know, it's all feel. He doesn't, you know, it's a bad body. He's not going to do it, you know, or, oh, yeah, his wrists are weak. And it's like, how do you
It's all
do
those
that?
guys
Yeah.
in Moneyball
Yeah.
that they fired, right? All the guys that Brad Pitt fired because
Yep.
they wouldn't get on board, right?
But it has been funny because you see, like, some of those old school guys are starting to embrace it.
Mm-hmm.
Others that haven't, you just don't see them around as much anymore. So the game is changing for sure in that way, but I don't think that's going to slow down in any way because they see benefit to it and result. And if you're not doing it and everybody else is,
Yeah.
you could get yourself in trouble. So,
Well, Brad, this is great, man. Thank you so much. I could talk another hour, but I appreciate you coming on. This has been really, really fun to talk. So we're going to finish with our 5 questions. We have 5 questions.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to start off with favorite sitcom.
ooh, favorite sitcom. I mean, I go through phases.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a sitcom, but right now on Apple TV, Shrinking.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Good
okay.
show.
I think that could be
I like that
considered
a lot.
a sitcom, yeah.
It's different than what sitcoms maybe
Sitcoms
used
are
to
kind
be.
of,
But
I mean,
yeah.
we kind of do it television
Well,
shows. sitcoms.
Jason, what's his name? The guy that's in it. He was in How I Met Your Mother, which
Yes.
you know, is, of
Yep.
course, you know, very much a sitcom.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Second thing is favorite dessert.
It would be apple pie.
Apple pie.
Yeah. I guess that
Baseball
kind
and
of goes
apple
with the
pie.
baseball thing. Yeah. I'm a little bit predictable.
I was going to say that's a little cliche, but I like it. I like it. So following along those lines, I'm adding in a death row meal. What's your like last meal if you had the choice?
Yeah. So there was a Mexican restaurant in Fort Wayne called Mi Pueblo. I love Mexican, but they had this dish called Pollo Supremo, and it was like a chicken, cheese, spice, and you'd make your own tortillas. That would be it for sure.
Nice.
Yeah.
There-
Well, then what's your favorite ballpark food? Like, what's your
Oh, yeah,
go-to
that's a
food
good
at the ballpark?
Yeah.
that's a good one.
So my staff laughs at me, but when you're there, all those days are like I try to not eat
Eat a hot dog
badly,
every day?
but probably 90% of our games I eat a grilled chicken sandwich. Just
Okay.
that. Yeah. So
Nice.
it's an option. Now, if you ask me what is probably something, so we had a grilled cheese cart last year, and our chef put together. I remember I was on the concourse walking, and he just like this was 2 years ago, and he hands me a grilled cheese, and he's like, "Hey, try this." I'm like, "Okay, what's going on?" So I took a bite, and literally within 3 seconds, without even thinking, I had basically eaten the whole thing because it was delicious. And I was like, "What is on there?" And he's like, "Well, it's rosemary and cinnamon."
Oh wow.
And I was like, cinnamon on a grilled cheese? Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have suspected that. But yeah,
Yeah.
so that would be one if I were a guilty pleasure. Like, it was very, very good.
Definitely. That's awesome. Okay, favorite season of the year.
Here or in Indiana?
Anywhere, wherever. Definitely
'Cause
not
they're,
winter.
They're
in
one and the
Indiana,
same.
I
Yeah.
imagine. Yeah.
I love fall.
Yeah.
You know, I spring and fall are probably equally. Like, I love the beginning of the season. You know, the temperatures are great. Like, people are just ready to get outside more often. But fall is probably the end of the season when we're getting to that point where it's, you know, the temperature does start to drop when the sun goes down, which, you know, doesn't always happen in the summer here. I think that's probably my favorite.
Baseball season would have been an acceptable answer.
Yeah, okay.
I was
yeah.
going to say baseball season, and the funny thing is, some people say fall or winter or whatever.
Yeah.
We had one person say Christmas. I didn't
Yeah.
even think of Christmas as a season.
True. Yeah.
And then one person said Halloween, which I didn't even think of Halloween as a season.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
you know, any of that kind of stuff works. And let's see, what's the last one? Favorite movie?
Favorite movie. Growing up, it was Hoosiers.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
So I take it you are from Indiana?
I am.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I grew up in Indiana.
Because I mean,
yeah.
you know.
You could have been from Illinois and then
Yeah.
went over to
Well,
Indiana.
Fort Wayne, in my opinion, as a South Carolinian, seems like a dart at the map kind of place. Like you throw a dart at the map and it hit Fort Wayne, you go, okay, well, I guess I'm going to Fort Wayne.
Yeah.
But if you're from Indiana, that
Yeah,
makes total sense.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
I don't
growing
know
up
where
in Indiana.
Is it Richmond, Indiana?
Richmond, Indiana. Yep. So it's
I've been
an
to
Oh, I
Indiana
thought you
a
meant
lot
Virginia.
and driven
So-
right through it a whole bunch.
Yeah, I
hour
remember-
east. It's on 70, straight east from Indianapolis, kind of right
okay.
on the Ohio border there.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I grew up Richmond, 35. I think the population was like 35,000 people, but our high school gym seated 8,500 and was full most Friday nights. Like
Nice.
it's just that was it in Indiana.
Yeah, coming from Indiana.
Yeah.
Hoosiers.
Well, I've driven through Indiana too, and I've never been. Well, I take that back. I did a shoot in Indianapolis one time.
Okay.
For one client 10 years ago. Went to see the Indy track and all that kind of.
Yeah.
Did all the little tourism stuff that you can do in Indianapolis, but that was the only time I liked it. I was only there for almost a full day. So I flew in the morning and did my interview in the afternoon and flew out the next morning. So
If you're ever up there again, it's about 30 miles east of Indianapolis. There's a gym in Knightstown, and that was the Hoosiers gym. Well, somebody went in and refurbished it, and now they sell it as an event space, but you can rent it out for like an hour, 3 hours with your buddies and actually play in the Hoosiers gym. So if
Nice.
you ever,
That's
if you're ever up in Indiana, you need a cool experience to get people together. That would be
there you
one.
go.
I've always wanted to stop at that farm
Oh yeah.
on 65. Can't remember the name of it right now, but I was like, every time I drive by, I'm like, I want to stop there one day. Never do.
Brian's from Wisconsin, so he drives.
Oh,
through
you
to
go
get
right
up
through.
to-
Yeah, absolutely.
And he also appreciates summer in South Carolina.
Yes.
Versus winter in Wisconsin.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
it's been pretty chilly the last week, though. I mean,
I can handle our 4 weeks of winter where it's in the 40s.
Yes. Yeah.
where it's around 40, somewhere around in
The
there.
kids were very disappointed.
Oh yeah, dude.
And I told them ahead of time, it's not going to snow.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's not going to snow. I don't care
And you
what
hate
it
to
says.
always be the pessimist dad.
Yeah.
You go, "Oh, kids, it's not going to be what they say it is." So just prepare yourself to be disappointed.
Oh yeah.
Kids, because
You have to stay the half a day at home and can't go outside. 'Cause
That's right.
It is sleeting rain, but no snow.
no snow, and it's probably not super safe for the buses to be out and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But still,
Yeah.
don't prepare us for a week for a snow day and then that. But
Yeah.
anyway, well, Brad, thank you so much, man. It's good to
Thanks, guys.
good to see you.
Absolutely.